Settled by the Pilgrims in 1659, Freetown is one of the oldest communities in the United States. Today, residents paint a serene picture of a modest village that takes care of its own.
I grew up here in Freetown, Massachusetts. Lived here pretty much all my life. You know, is very much a friendly country setting.
Freetown is a very small town, a little quaint town with not too much industry going on. That's the way the locals seem to like it.
It's a good place to grow up. The people are good, and we look out for each other.
But one thing sets Freetown apart from the many other idyllic villages that pepper the region.
Within the town of Freetown, there is a huge forest that's about a 10,000-acre preserve. And it's called the Freetown Fall River State Forest.
As clean and quaint and beautiful as Freetown is, everybody who lives around here knows about the shadow that the forest casts upon the town. I always describe the forest as its own entity.
There's something in the forest. It is well known as the cursed forest.
Residents commonly refer to the Freetown State Forest as the Cursed Forest because it is well known as a place where terrible and unexplainable things happen.
I believe the curse is to keep people out of the forest. I believe the power of the curse is what's fueling all the bad things that have gone on.
Many keep their distance at all costs.
When I was growing up, my parents told me they never wanted me to go in the forest by myself.
You definitely feel that there might be something walking with you.
I work for the Freetown Police Department, and I work for the Bristol County District Attorney's Office.
Alan Alves spent his career patrolling the Freetown State Forest.
That state forest is not the same as any other forest anywhere that I've ever been in my life. The hairs in your arms stand up on end. And if you notice, we're in the woods where you don't hear birds, you don't see deer. It just feels very eerie here, very eerie. It's like cold. I was a young rookie, and I rode with the lieutenant, and I saw these people in the woods, red robes and stuff like that around the fire. And I said, what's going on here? He said, those are just hippies left over from the 60s. Don't worry about it. But it turned out not to be. These groups, these people were doing some very heinous things in the forest.
Alan's career will take him deep into this fortress of darkness, commonly known as the Cursed Forest. Originally believed by other officers to be harmless hippies, Alan soon learned that the group was far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined.
They would tie ribbons that you could track. They're yellow means turn right. You come to another ribbon, it might be red. Turn left until you came to the site of the actual rituals. And that's when we were finding some of the evidence, the rituals that took place. You know, the large stone, pentagrams in the ground, dead animals. There was one where we found 20 or 25 calves completely drained of blood. I felt like I was in a horror movie. but it wasn't, it was real.
Police officer Alan Alves began examining disturbing activity in these so-called cursed woods in the 1970s, embarking on one of the most frightening investigations of his career.
I started doing research, and I brought photographs of what I took, what I saw in the state forest.
Alan discovered that the pictures that he had taken matched up with symbols commonly used in satanic rituals.
And I started understanding what was going on there. It was rituals of worshiping Satan.
Since first stepping into the forest, Alan felt a dark energy, and as a young and hungry rookie, he was determined to find out the source of the evil gripping his hometown. He soon learned that a man named Carl Drew was at the center of the disturbing activity taking place in the Freetown forest.
I think the forest brought out the darkness in Carl Drew.
When Carl Drew's crimes were discovered, he was brought in for questioning.
He believed that Satan will punish you, even if he has Carl Drew do it. Carl Drew was a pimp. If any of Carl Drew's girls got out of line, they would be violently punished. It was a very active cult. They were doing their rituals in the forest. I was directed to an area where these hunters found the bunker. The cults are very secretive. They're very protective. They're the ones who become very dangerous.
The horror that he is about to unearth reveals a whole new level to the group's depravity. What he found there were the makings of a nightmare.
Chair had an upside-down cross on it. I learned that in the satanic religion, sacrifices of newborn babies are the best sacrifice, followed by children, followed by female.
Though it is never proven that children were sacrificed, eventually the cult's leader, Carl Drew, is arrested for murdering one of his followers, and the activity in the forest seems to subside.
When you hear the name Carl Drew, it is like somebody poured ice water down your back. It was very, very upsetting.
But not every eerie encounter can be connected to Carl Drew.
You have people right up to today, they're enacting the same kind of things that the cult did. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? You know, in this case, was there a negative energy before the cult came, and that's why they even picked the forest?
The problems and the strange things in the state forest didn't start with Carl Drew or end with Carl Drew.
What is the curse that lies beneath the surface of the forest and seems to attract so much darkness and evil? Many believe that there are dark forces in the forest. Years after Alan Alves investigated Carl Drew's evil cult, disturbing things continue to happen in these mysterious woods.
Evil things, satanic things still went on in the forest. People were still having rituals. People were committing suicide. Other people had been found dead there. Why does everyone pick the forest? Something's drawing them to it.
The Freetown State Forest appears to be a force field like no other. Something deep in these woods has an immense power to bring out evil. Those who know the history of the region are certain that the experiences of the Native Americans here have contributed to the forest's dark energy. Long before the cult activity and other modern murders, the Native American Wampanoag people faced horrors in these cursed woods that nearly led to their annihilation.
The Wampanoag people came up from the south as the ice retreated, as the bays were formed. We've been here about 12,000 years.
Hartman Dietz is a member of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe.
The Freetown State Forest in particular is an area where Wampanoag people have had ongoing presence.
The dark history trickled down. The evil that could be responsible for the King Philip's War may be the reason why you have such dark crimes such as the satanic activity. To this day, people still report very strange and unsettling things around this area.
In the cursed forest, a spot known as the Ocelot Ledge has been the unfortunate site of many suicides. Could this have something to do with its proximity to the Hockomock Swamp?
The first time I went up there, I felt an enormous feeling to jump, and I backed away from it. It was really a strong feeling. And then I tried to get back, and it was a strange feeling that I was going to fall, and I got further and further back. And I've never walked out to that ledge ever since.
Once a bunch of us friends were at the Ocelot Ledge. I'm afraid of heights, would not go near the edge. And I felt this weird feeling come over me. And my friends saw me stop walking to the edge of the ledge. They thought I was gonna jump. And I don't remember any of it.
One local legend says that during the King Philip's War, a number of Wampanoag warriors leapt to their deaths from the Ocelot Ledge to avoid being killed by the colonists. Might this be the reason people feel that they are being lured towards the edge?
I found a large wooden cross, homemade cross, near a rock. It had some, looked like rubber binding, and there was blood on the rock.
It appears that someone has been tied to the cross. The blood is sent off to forensics. Forensic results reveal that the blood is human.
Two boys were out on their motorcycles, their dirt bikes. And they saw what they thought was a Halloween decoration or something. There was a tree about 5 inches in diameter on the side of a hill. And as they approached, they saw it was a girl.
I was dispatched over there. It was out of sight from the dirt road. It was down the dirt road off the main road. And the main road was a not very well-traveled road. They just pointed up the hill and said it was up that hill. They didn't even want to go back there. Then when I walked up the hill to sign up, I saw it. It was the body of Mary Lou Ruder. I've been involved in investigating satanic crime for 2 decades in the Freetown State Forest.
With the Freetown State Forest, they were always finding upside-down crosses, and there was always talk of satanic cult activity out there. Alves was always chasing rumors out there.
The detective admits devil worship is a difficult crime to prosecute.
What they do, they have a pentagram. Satan would come out of the center of it. We found animals with absolutely no blood in them at all. They would drain the blood right out of them. It would be opposite of the Catholic Church, and they would drink blood instead of wine.
Detective Alan Alves of the Freetown Police is an expert on satanic cults.
This is definitely, indications of Satanism. It's their constitutional rights to practice any religion they want. Our concern is in the exercise of that religion, that they're not committing any crimes. I never saw a real live ritual, saw the aftermath of it, and I was advised of what went on with some of the people that were in the cult. I said, they're going to sacrifice a human being because that's what's required on Halloween and on May 1st is a human sacrifice.
The Freetown State Forest. The area is a 10,000-acre state preserve located within the lower right-hand portion of the Bridgewater Triangle. The forest has a long history of reported paranormal activity, including a series of ghostly hauntings and unexplained creature sightings. But unlike other locations within the Bridgewater Triangle, the Freetown State Forest has seen a disproportionate amount of criminal activity. During the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, rumors of a satanic cult operating within the forest spread fear throughout the local community. Evidence of gruesome animal sacrifices substantiated the rumors and prompted local law enforcement officials to launch investigations into the strange activity. Retired Freetown Police Lieutenant Detective Alan Alves spent much of his career researching the activity of satanic cults in the region and was responsible for the investigations concerning the slaughtered animals. During his many years of investigating cult activity, Alves has seen many strange and disturbing things.
I was a young patrolman way back in the early 70s. We used to patrol the state forest, and we used to come across these people in robes and stuff, and the lieutenant used to tell me, oh, those are leftover hippies from the 60s camping out, because I used to see all kind of weird things over there. But then some hunters and people used to go around, we'd find some evidence of satanic graffiti on the rocks and animal bones, and started looking into it, and we learned that it was some ritualistic satanic activity after I discovered it. The activity started getting even worse. We saw dead animals, cruelty to animals and so forth, and stories and rumors of child molestation and even rumors of homicides and so forth.
Eventually, a lead emerged which identified a satanic cult likely responsible for much of the ritual sacrifice in the state forest. In 1979, the nearby city of Fall River, already famous as the home of the Lizzie Borden murder trial, became engrossed in what would become one of the most sensational homicide cases in Massachusetts history. In October of that year, the remains of Doreen Levesque, a known prostitute, were found behind the stadium bleachers at Diamond Vocational High School in Fall River. Levesque's hands had been tied behind her back, and her skull had been crushed. The crime scene included evidence of sexual abuse and ritualistic overtones. 3 months later, the remains of Barbara Raposa, another known prostitute, were discovered in the woods behind a local printing plant. Like Doreen Levesque, Raposa's hands had been tied together and her skull had been crushed. Over time, investigators learned that members of a local prostitution ring were also participating in satanic rituals.
Detective Alan Sylvia from Fall River and Paul Carey, they did most of that investigation. I was just peripheral on it, but I assisted.
In November of 1979, law enforcement officials received multiple leads from several prostitutes that a satanic cult was conducting rituals in both the Freetown State Forest and a Fall River housing project. Soon after, Carey and his partner went undercover and attended a satanic ritual in a Fall River apartment building. The ritual involved bizarre chanting and cries of "Hail Satan." Carey learned that 17-year-old pimp and prostitute Robin Murphy and 25-year-old pimp Carl Drew were leading followers in bizarre satanic rites. Eventually, Carey interviewed another local prostitute, Karen Marsden. Marsden stated that both Carl Drew and Robin Murphy had ritualistically murdered Doreen Levesque and Barbara Raposa. Weeks later, Karen Marsden failed to meet with Carey for a follow-up interview. 6 months later, her skull was found at Family Beach in nearby Westport, Massachusetts. Near the skull, police discovered a clump of the victim's hair, along with cat skulls and sheep bones. In 1980, Carl Drew and Robin Murphy were arrested in connection with the string of murders. In the case of Karen Marsden, Murphy pled guilty to second-degree murder. In exchange for a life sentence with the possibility of parole, Murphy agreed to testify against Carl Drew in his upcoming trial. In 1982, Drew was convicted in the first degree for the murder of Karen Marsden. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Condemned by mainstream satanic religious organizations like the Church of Satan and the Temple of Set, ritual sacrifice and criminal deeds in the name of Satan remain controversial subjects. Nevertheless, Self-stylized Satanists ritualistically sacrificing animals and committing crimes in the name of the Dark Lord continued in the Freetown State Forest long after the arrests and convictions of Robin Murphy and Carl Drew. In some cases, it was difficult to determine whether hardline Satanists or curious, impressionable teenaged youth carried out the subsequent activities. In the late 1980s, a series of grave robberies occurred involving small cemeteries in remote sections of the Freetown State Forest.
They were dug up, skulls removed, remains removed, or at least 4 or 5 that I know of that we found afterwards.
New England Paranormal Research founder and author John Brightman has been investigating strange occurrences in the Bridgewater Triangle for over a decade. Recently, Brightman published Dark Gift, a fictional novel based on his numerous investigations in the Freetown State Forest. Growing up in Freetown, Brightman is well acquainted with the many stories surrounding the State Forest region.
We're at the Freetown Cemetery right off of South Main Street here in Assonet, where this mausoleum behind me was broken into, and juveniles actually stole the head out of here.
They broke into the mausoleum and broke into the crypt. They removed the body from the crypt, the body of a female, and they cut the head off. They removed it and put it in the car, but as they were driving away, the smell was so bad that they ended up hiding it in the bushes. We ended up arresting 3 juveniles that were involved in that break-in, and they told them they were using it to get into a satanic cult.
When they were caught, the story that one of them told was that they believed that they could gain power by drinking from the skull. The other 2 kind of were involved in a periphery way. One of them said he was just along for the ride. The other one said that he believed in the occult and he thought that this would be kind of a cool thing to do. All of them have since said that there's no way they were involved in the occult at all and it was just kind of a kid's prank. But this is the kind of thing that happens in the state forest.
Obviously, it brought a lot of attention and people were coming here to check it and see what was going on. They decided to take off the metal gate door and actually brick it in so nobody could break into it ever again. We're here in the Freetown State Forest up at the Faxon Animal Rescue League Pet Cemetery. People that had put down their pets at Faxon would bring them up here to give them a proper burial. In the 80s, this was shut down because people that were part of cults or trying to get into cults were coming up here, digging up the animals' remains in turn to be able to use that during the rituals.
Many locations in and around the Freetown State Forest have long been associated with alleged satanic activity. 2 sites in particular have captured the imaginations of local residents. Swirling with rumors of child rape, animal sacrifice, and even ritualistic murder were a hidden underground bunker and a remote makeshift hut.
A hunter who was walking through the woods discovered an underground bunker. And what this was basically built into a hill. There was an underground lair. It was then covered with a blue tarp and then of course all the stuff that you would naturally find in the forest. So unless you approached it from the right angle, you wouldn't be able to tell that there was anything there at all.
If you went to the one side, it was dropped down and you could go inside. And it had some disturbing things in it. There's some dolls with heads cut off and then a little tiny chair that a 2-year-old would sit in and looked like they chopped it out of a tree. Had some bindings there and so forth.
It was very clear that whatever was working there was kind of connecting some kind of child abuse and perhaps child abduction with some kind of occult twist to it.
There wasn't anything of any evidentiary material there where we could trace back to any individual or group. Persons of interest told me about this hut that supposedly was in the woods that was used by the people involved in the Fall River cult. Witnesses indicated that's where some of the rituals took place. We were led down there. It was at least a 2.5-mile walk into the woods. And there we found the hut and we found all the trappings of satanic worship, the upside down pentagram, dolls nailed to the trees and so forth. Apparently it could have been used in the winter because it was made with very insulated material. And it was about the size of a prison cell.
For over 2 decades, the exact locations of these satanic dens remained the subject of debate. However, in the fall of 2012, The producers of this documentary were successful in rediscovering the locations in question. Following a lead from Freetown resident Mike Fournier, the filmmakers were led to the collapsed remains of the notorious underground bunker.
I was walking out in the woods with my father. We came across this little hole in the ground. I remember walking in and seeing a big pentagram on the floor, and then 2 cots with a big fire pit right in the middle. It doesn't really look the same anymore, but this is definitely the spot.
Hidden away off on an old logging trail in the Freetown portion of the state forest, pieces of the barely recognizable bunker are still covered with faint traces of satanic graffiti. Shortly after finding the underground bunker, the filmmakers confirmed an approximate whereabouts of the infamous makeshift hut, commonly referred to as Carl Drew's shack. Based on information in a 1988 Standard Times article and leads from Alan Alves and a local Cranberry Bog employee, the collapsed remains of the hut were found in a remote section of dense woodlands just outside of the Freetown State Forest. For years, paranormal researchers, ghost tour patrons, and curious investigators have found numerous abandoned hunting cabins, ranger stations, and ice shacks, all of which were mistaken as either the underground bunker or makeshift hut. The 2012 expeditions to the areas in question helped to resolve any confusion regarding the definitive locations of these 2 renowned forest hideaways. And although both the bunker and hut are commonly associated with Carl Drew and the Fall River cult, a definitive link to the suspects in question has never been fully established. Also important to note is that no confirmed human victims of satanic ritualistic sacrifice have ever been discovered within either the boundaries of the Freetown State Forest or within the traditional borders of the entire 200 square mile Bridgewater Triangle.
Myself and a state police canine unit wanted to just bring the dogs in and go around and see if we could find the remains of any bodies buried and so forth in the state forest. So we set up a couple of days to do that with the dogs, and then at the last minute, powers that be canceled the operation.
The majority of the cults that find their way here to the Freetown State Forest, whether they be labeled satanic or whether they be labeled something else, are not criminal in any way. It just seems to be that the more organized that cult becomes, the more likely that they are involved in kind of deeper, darker crimes.
Despite a lack of evidence for crimes involving human sacrifice in the Freetown State Forest, evidence of animal sacrifice was routinely discovered throughout the 1970s, 80s, and 90s.
What began in the forest as pigeons and small animals quickly moved up to larger animals until finally there were cow carcasses being found here.
In 1999, a dozen baby calves were slaughtered in a satanic ritual near the Dartmouth side of the forest.
A huge amount of calves left in the middle of the state forest with the absence of blood. And they used that blood in their sacrifices.
What that really signaled to people like Alan Alves and other law enforcement was that things were getting more serious, and that perhaps more organized, darker elements were finding their way into the forest.
The cattle mutilations of the late 1990s marked the last known instance of satanic ritual sacrifice in the Freetown State Forest. Although satanic-related crimes and activity often dominate headlines relating to the Freetown State Forest, the area has also been associated with a number of isolated crimes, odd occurrences, and paranormal activity.